encompass the needs of the targeted population. So when we look at public policy, जब हम public policy की बात करते हैं, there are several factors that have to be kept in mind. Socio-economic factor, socio-political factor, and socio-cultural factor. Socio-economic factor क्यों? It's socio-economic, society first, economy later. And your society will reflect its economic background. So is it agrarian society? Is it industrial society? Is it a combination of both? And based on which policies are then designed. अगर एग्रेरियन सोसाइटी है तो आपको पॉलिसीज उसी तरह से डिजाइन करनी पड़ेंगी, आपको उन्हीं लोगों को एनकम्पास करना पड़ेगा, उन्हीं लोगों को उनकी नीड्स को एसिमिलेट करना पड़ेगा. यू विल हैव मोर फार्म बेस्ड पॉलिसीज, यू विल हैव पॉलिसीज बेस्ड ऑन सब्सिडी regarding a seed subsidy or agricultural subsidy. You will have policies regarding more of rural policies. Agar agrarian economy hai, if it's industrial policy, if it's an industrial economy, then you'll have policies encompassing those, how to obtain raw material, export and import policies, trade policies, right? When we look at socio-political factor, in what in the timeline of political stability, where does your country stand? Is there a military coup? Are you a democracy? Are you a monarchy? And based on which this welfare policy will reflect those designs. So if you're a democracy, yes, you will have the opinion of people taking into account as to what do you want, in the shape of a policy. How should your education policy be formulated? Do you want more of subsidy? Do you want more privatization in education? Do you want a mix of both? In trade, do you want a public-private partnership? Do you want private participation? Do you want more indigenous industries? What kind of policies do you want? And how well is your political supportability affecting the said policy? Agar aapke paas democracy hai, and let's say it's a multi-party system, the decisions will take time. Agar multi-party system, if you remember UPA 1 was more stable than UPA 2. NDA 1 was less stable than NDA 2, and now we have a single party system which is far more stable. So decision making process is easier, the decisions are quicker, and hence we are not delaying ourselves in reaching a particular decision. So the political factor always affects the way your policies are designed and the policies are implemented. Socio-cultural factor, a very important factor which cannot be ignored. Why? Cultural aspect defines who you were in the past. I've mentioned this in the past also, like Punjab. Punjab was a cold desert. Punjab की जब हम बात करते हैं तो हमारे दिमाग में आता है सरसों का साग, मकई की रोटी. सरसों और मकई वहां उगता है जहां कम पानी होता है. So it's a reminiscent कि वहां पे पानी कम हुआ करता था. Again, look at Rajasthan. Rajasthani thali is very vibrant, lot of red color, lot of red chilies, etc., etc. Their dress exhibits a lot of color. Pagdi में सफा में बहुत रंग होते हैं. Why? Because the thing that was not provided by nature, people incorporated in their culture. And now after Green Revolution, Punjab became the wheat bowl of India. But look what Punjab is dealing with right now. It's dealing with a drug problem. It's dealing with brides being left behind. It's dealing with a massive obsession of Canada and the West. It's dealing with excessive, it's dealing with excessive, again, I mentioned a drug problem. So socio-cultural factor defines who you were, and it is a reminiscence of the fact, where are you headed? Right? So after Green Revolution, yes, now how many Punjabi farmers are actually working in the field? There are a lot of migrants from UP and Bihar, and that has its own set of problems. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. While designing policy of any country, of any state, of any district, we have to keep this in mind. The base of the pyramid is the physiological need. We all need food, water, warmth to survive. And this is the basic need. Safety need jo uske upar hai, if you see, the security and safety need, meaning as a human being, you need food to nourish your body, you need water because you're 70% water, the body is 70% water, you need warmth, you need shelter, etc. But you also need a sense of security to exist in a society. You also need sense of safety to coexist in a society. Ye hai basic need. Iske upar comes the need of belongingness, love needs. You need relationships, you need friends and family to make you feel as a part of the society. Then esteem needs. How do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about your work? How do you feel about the people you're connected with? That's the psychological need. Or sabse upar aata hai self-actualization. That you have achieved your full potential. But know this, the biggest parallelogram, the largest area of the parallelogram is the physiological need, and all the other needs rest on physiological need. So if this particular need is 50% met, all the rest of the needs will also be 50% met. So in order to survive as an accomplished a human being achieving your full potential, you need to have your physiological needs met at the maximum, to the utmost potential. Only then your safety needs will be fulfilled. Only then the rest of the needs will be fulfilled. अगर मैं इस parallelogram को आधा कर दूं, तो आपका pyramid भी आधा हो जाएगा. You know? So what developed countries have done, they have successfully taken care of the bottom two tier of the pyramid: physiological need and safety need. You go to United States, you have education being provided. If you can afford a private education, well and good, but there's nothing wrong with a public school setup, right? If you can afford in terms of safety, yes, you have been taken care of. The police response, the civil administration, the civil security responds promptly. So hence the top three, belongingness, esteem, self-actualization, is readily achieved. Why? Because the state takes care of the bottom two. In developing countries, the state does not take care of the bottom two. It is still taking care of the bottom two. So in India, you will find every public policy which focuses on shelter, Indira Awas Yojana, which focuses on drinking water. Look at Bharat Nirman program. All the programs in Bharat Nirman, PMGSY, Indira Awas Yojana, Rajiv Gandhi Vidyutikaran Yojana, the drinking water scheme, they're all providing basic needs. They're still providing the bottom tier of the pyramid and the second bottom tier of the pyramid, right? Because of which the top three are unable to develop, or they're still developing. Whereas in the developed countries, the bottom two is taken care of. That's why you have more of startups. That's why people have enough faith in the system or in the society that they create. They're job givers. They're not relying on the state to provide them with jobs. They're not relying on state to provide them with employment. So keeping that in mind, every policy is a reflection of how your country has taken care of your needs based on this particular pyramid. We move on to this particular diagram. This is Riggs prismatic Sala model. Now, in this particular diagram, you see you have an agrarian society, a prismatic society, and an industrial society. A society moves, the trajectory of the society moves in unidirection. You move from agrarian to industrial. You do not move backwards. So every society started as an agrarian society. We were all villages, and then we moved on to prismatic society, meaning there were we were in a transition phase, and moving on to an industrial society, which is a more diffracted, a more specialized society. Now, based on your existence in this particular diagram, your policies will be designed. So if I were to put Delhi, I would put Delhi in industrial society. I would put US in industrial society. I would put Bombay in industrial society, but I would put Aurangabad in prismatic society. I would put Sitamarhi in prismatic society. I would put Champaran in agrarian society. And when I'm able to make this distinction, I should be able to formulate the policy around that distinction. Because imagine if I were to initiate an industrial policy in Champaran, it would not work. If I were to initiate an agrarian policy in United States, it would not work. Why? Because I do not have the infrastructure and I do not have the demand. So if I'm able to identify where does my targeted area or my targeted beneficiary lie in this particular scheme of things, only then I'm able to design a policy. Only then I'm able to reach out to them and help them with the targeted benefits. Then again, so this particular model of Riggs prismatic Sala model, like in agrarian society, there is a culmination and a mixture of specialization. गांव में हर चीज का यूज होता है, nothing is wasted. Whereas in industrial society, everything is specialized. So there are specialization within specialization, and they can be accommodated. Why? Because it's mechanized. It's because how would I explain this? This particular jacket, the coat that I'm wearing is black in color. Ye fact hai. Which means that this color is absorbing every other light. It's reflecting the color black. You are seeing this color black, and we have been taught in school कि इस color को black कहा जाता है. And you could attribute any other color to it. Probably it's dark, deep navy or something of that sort, depending on what you've learned. But this is color black. This is a fact. But the value I decide to attribute to this color color black will be depending on what I have or the society that I'm associated with. So in some cultures, color black is the color of death. In some culture, color black is a color of party, little black dress, a black dress or something. In some cultures, color black signifies celebration. In some culture, it's the color that your spirit wears when your the color of Yamraj. Okay, okay, stop laughing. Okay, so that's the value that I'm attributing to this. Imagine in Indian society, the value that we attribute to education is immense. Why? Because we believe that education is a pathway to employment. That linkage I will discuss later. But we have attributed to this. The value that we attribute to a woman having children, to a woman being fertile, is higher. Why? Because we think that she's going to give us the next offspring. She's creating the future. That's why a lot of public policies, Janani Suraksha Yojana, Matritva Yojana, Ladli scheme, they all focus on women fertility and women reproductory health. Whereas a lot of women suffer from lifestyle diseases, high blood pressure, hypertension, heart diseases, but there are no policies addressing that. I'm going to talk about that also. Then another thing is identifying counterfactual. Like I said, how much of value are you willing to attribute to clean drinking water? How much of value are you willing to attribute to free education? How much of value are you willing to attribute to institutional deliveries? Instead of having deliveries at home and being at risk of infections, unable to perform C-section by a midwife, how much of value are you willing to attribute to these aspects? And once you identify that, yes, we want to lower the maternal mortality rate, or yes, we want to lower the child mortality rate, and yes, we want to increase the number of institutional deliveries, then the process of initiating and designing public policy will then take on. If we just say that we want to lower the literacy rate, डिफाइन लिटरेसी रेट, क्या सिर्फ नाम लिख लेना या फिफ्थ तक पढ़ना लिटरेसी है? अदरवाइज एवरी फार्मर इज लिटरेट, बट आप ये नहीं आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते कि इतने ब्याज पे आप इतने रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट पे आपका इतना ब्याज लगता है, या बैंक सस्ता रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट देता है, सस्ता लोन देता है, लेकिन क्योंकि मनी लेंडर आपका जान पहचान का है, so you are willing to pay 50% of a rate of interest and be in a massive debt. And then of course you have farmer suicide and other forms of social evil. So identifying that counterfactual is very important. And once we've identified, because I remember in the case of Vidarbha, when UPA 2 was in power, UPA 2 made a very progressive decision. They said we are going to waiver the farm loans, but there was a catch. UPA 2 waived the institutional farm loan. जिन farmers ने NABARD से loan लिया था, जिन farmers ने बैंक से loan लिया था, उनके loan waiver हुए थे. But the suicides were being committed by farmers who had taken loans from the local money lenders. उनसे government deal नहीं कर सकती. You understand that? That's why when micro financial inclusion was brought in, Jan Dhan Yojana, और जब सबके बैंक account खोले गए, that was the financial inclusion, so that not only that you are kept on the radar, but also that your financial transactions are made easier. कि कल को अगर आपको loan चाहिए तो ये एक जरिया है loan लेने का. So this particular problem was addressed by identifying that counterfactual, that a lot of people are accessing credit through non-institutional mechanism, which is local money lenders, and not institutional mechanism, which is your banks and your corporate banks created by the government bodies. Sorry, this slide is not clear, but मैं ऐसे बता देती हूँ. जो yellow color का, this is actually one of my study materials. जो yellow color का circle है, that is technically correct. Blue is political supportability, and red is organizational implementability. So this particular strategic triangle and the mix or a blend of these three factors are important for any public policy to be institutionalized and be successful. एक होता है technically correct. Yes, we have to increase the literacy rate. आप कैसे करेंगे literacy rate increase? आप schools खोलेंगे, आप teachers hire करेंगे, आप funding देंगे, आप teachers को salary देंगे, आप make sure करेंगे teachers आते हैं. So that is technical correctness. Next is political supportability. Education is one area that no political party will ever oppose or ever contradict. Why? Because education has social value. पढ़े लिखे की society में value है. चाहे आप 5वीं तक पढ़े, 8वीं तक पढ़े, PhD करके पढ़े, कहीं से भी पढ़े, but education की आपकी society में value है. Education के भगवान भी हैं, माँ सरस्वती. And every, we all worship, we have festival around it. I am going to be in so much trouble. Okay. But but it is socially acceptable, right? And then comes organizational is it implementable? क्या आप इसको organizationally implement कर सकते हैं? Yes, hire contractors to build schools, hire contractual teachers or permanent teachers, create a budget for for funding, giving access to increasing teachers' salary, teachers' training, creating reading material, creating study material, students' personality development, all of that can be achieved. So when these three criteria, technical correctness, organizational if you're closer to election, political parties will be hesitant to change the syllabus. You can, it is technically correct. Syllabus change करने में ज़्यादा time नहीं लगता. आप committee form कीजिए, आप experts को बुलाइए, syllabus change हो जाएगा. But if you're closer to election, a political party may or may not change the syllabus. Is it organizationally implementable? Absolutely. You change the syllabus, you print, you issue the books in the schools. You can do that. But political supportability may or may not be available. Similarly, creating a controversial monument, political supportability may not be available, or creating a bridge, technical correctness may not be available. So in any policy, for it to see the light of the day, for it to be acceptable, and for it to be properly advocated, all these three factors have to align. Then comes policy design. So there is this concept that that we studied at Harvard that was called the theory of change. Meaning, I'll give you an example of what it is. Let's again, increasing literacy rate. I want to increase the literacy rate in my district. How would I do that? So I would initiate that. All right, free education to everybody. Congratulations, हमने free education दी, लोगों को fees भरने की जरूरत नहीं है. Supposing मेरे district में people are reluctant to send girls to school, then this is a social issue, right? Even if I reduce the fees or I waiver the fees, this is convincing parents to send girls to school will be a problem. You know, I have to take a different approach, right? So the intervention would be interacting with parents, convincing them, and seeing what the output is. So let's say I'm able to convince parents. The output is 50% of girl students come to my class, come to school. The outcome is those 50% of the girl students, when they come to school, they go back home, the environment of the home undergoes a change. You know, maybe there might be an elder grandparent who does not like to see granddaughter going to school, but over the period of time, he or she gets used to it, right? The community and the people around that particular family are influenced, and they feel that yes, there is a positive outcome. So the outcome would be that people are encouraged to send their daughters to school, and the impact is gradually the rate of literacy rate increases, right? Gradually the rate of literacy rate in women increases. Ekdam se to nahi hoga, right? But this is how you design a theory of change, that what is the intervention you're willing to do and what would be the immediate output. आपने इंटरवेंशन किया, ये भी हो सकता है कि there's a massive protest, ये भी हो सकता है the school is shut down, और ये भी हो सकता है कि वो देखा देखी लड़के भी नहीं आए, ये भी हो सकता है. So we will consider both the scenario, implement it, and then see how the output is done. So this is what is done when any public policy or any welfare program is implemented on a pilot basis. When we look at the several gaps in policy designs, yes, these are absolutely a beautiful way to design policies, and they're absolutely amazing way to implement policy. But what are the gaps? You know, weak performance owing to principal agent problem. You have identified counterfactual that in this particular district, people are unable to send their kids to school because of a lack of infrastructure. But the local contractor is unwilling to engage in this particular contract or particular project because there is no margin. You know, or the local contractor is not willing because they want private educators or private schools to flourish. So in that kind of a scenario, the government and the private sector is at a tussle, right? Misaligned incentives. Yes, we have opened schools. आपने सर्व शिक्षा अभियान शुरू कर दिया, but सर्व शिक्षा अभियान was successful because of midday meal scheme, and midday meal scheme has been copied from the hot meal program of United States. Every school provides a hot meal, has a hot meal program, meaning you get a hot lunch. And it's a nutritious lunch with all the food groups, so milk, protein, carbs, everything, you know, and that has prompted parents to just be carefree about their kids' nutrition as well as education. So the mind is nourished as well as the body is nourished, you know. So SSA, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, has been bolstered by the midday meal scheme. When we look at correlation, the third is correlation is not causation. आप ये कभी नहीं सोच सकते कि education is a pathway to employment, because, you know, if we look at the West, most of your big industry, your Facebook, your Twitter, your Google were by people who dropped out. And a lot of my students, they say that, you know, Bill Gates dropped out. Well, he dropped out of Harvard. Let's not forget that. He got into Harvard and he dropped out. But Google was started by two dropped out PhDs of Stanford. Facebook was started by Mark Zuckerberg, who dropped out again of his degree. We're talking about, we have to stop forming these correlations that, you know, if you achieve a whole degree, because the gestation period in education is longer. is longest. हम सबने PhD की है, कितना time लगा हम सबको, you know, and then getting into employment, etc., and you know, so on and so forth. So making sure that we are not correlating employment, skill building, providing jobs with just education. Yes, you need a basic skill, of course, but enhancing vocational studies. That's why in NEP, the NEP 2020, the government is stressing a lot on vocational studies. The government is stressing a lot on what do you call skill-based education, for that matter. Then inadequate regulations. You have beautifully designed policies like Manarega, but Manarega had its own challenges in the form of you know, ghost beneficiaries. Manarega had its own challenges in the form of people who were not below the poverty line but decided to avail that particular benefit. And then corruption. When I taught ethics in governance, I defined corruption as deviation from procedure. Administratively, corruption is deviation from procedure. And if you're able to identify in the trajectory of procedure that there is a lapse somewhere, then responsibility fixation is done. That's how administration is identified in corruption is identified in administration. When we look at the gaps in policy implementation, coordination failure. You have a beautiful policy, but are you able to implement at the grassroots level? Maybe there is a lag between what is written and what is being interpreted. Maybe there is a lag between what people thought this policy might do for them and this is not what is being promised. Maybe there's a lag between the way it is being advocated. Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan ka jo beautiful jingle hai, school chale hum, and on every 26th January, some school performs on that particular song, and it's a very catchy jingle. Then again, and everywhere you go, then also PMGSY, agar aapne dekha hai, PMGSY ka bada acha symbol hai. There is this kind of a lightning symbol, and all the feeder roads have that particular have that particular access to the program. Then again, the coordination failure is one of the major causes of a beautifully structured program of not reaching out to people and failing on their anticipation. Then organizational transformation and values. Maybe what you thought and what you delivered are different. Maybe what people anticipated and what people wanted and what the government promised are different. The possibility of elite capture. This is an example of Delhi. Long back when I was in school, a lot of schools were given a tax rebate based on the fact that they will reserve 25% of their seats for students coming from underprivileged and economically weaker section. But what started happening was that these elite schools, when these kids from underprivileged section and what do you call economically weaker section, when they started attending these schools, they started feeling left out. A lot of inferiority complex developed in them, and these kids started going into depression. You know, although these schools were able to get a good amount of tax rebate, but the program was that people coming from a certain section of society should have access to the same level of education, the same quality of education. That did not happen. You know, so that's an example of elite capture. That these schools were situated in one of the prime districts, one of the prime zones of Delhi. You know, in Khelgaon Marg, in CP, in all the prime zones, but that particular program did not deliver. Then, of course, civil society mobilization for bad causes. You know, so NGOs in terms of then your Anganwadi villagers, Anganwadi Benjis, these kind of they have a potential to mobilize and disseminate information across at a very faster pace. Why? Because if a government employee were to go to a district for the first time, people would see him or her as an alien, you know, as an alienated entity. However, if the Anganwadi Behenji from the same community goes and tells women that, you know, there is a program which gives you nutrition, which gives you what do you call which gives you cash benefit and is also giving you fortified cereals so that, you know, your health can be taken care of, the health of the newborn can be taken care of, and these are the vaccination that you can get at the local health center. Because it's a familiar face telling you about these particular programs, the people from the community will have a more faith instilled in that particular program. And that's what matters when you're talking about policy advocacy, you know, because in villages, people are more people are more what do you call, they're more likely to believe somebody who looks like them, who is from their community. It could be a bad influence, क्योंकि वहां पे गांव में अगर आपने देखा होगा ये चिट फंड और दो महीने में पैसे डबल और इस तरह की स्कीम स्कैम्स बहुत ज्यादा होते हैं, राइट? क्यों? क्योंकि उनकी जान पहचान का ही कोई करता है, राइट? So then again, civil society mobilization for bad causes is one of the prime areas and one of the prime weaknesses of a public policy program. Then this is actually one of the most crucial questions. Should the government do business? You know, you have to identify what do you define as a public good and a public externality. So is education a public good? Because agar education public good hai, so then how does government trade it and define it as a commodity? Should you sell it? Should you invest in it? Should you invite foreign investors in education? Right? Similarly, is public health a public good? Is it a commodity? And because if it's a commodity, then you'll have to invest in order for it to grow. You want private participation in public health, you want private investment in public health, and hence these certain policies will have to be designed accordingly. And then, of course, monopoly of power is does your centrally funded program has extreme central domination? Bharat Nirman program had 100% was 100% centrally funded. PMGSY was 100% centrally funded. What happened because of that? In areas like Bihar and UP and Jharkhand, it was in its 11th phase. Why? Because it was centrally funded, it was governed by the central government, and hence leakage among the program were very few, were very less. Then, of course, there are certain external factors like pressure groups, which bring in problems and which bring in issues of remotest area in the light of the government's eye, in the line of sight. International organization, for a particular country, a certain issue may not be of relevance, but internationally it might. Due to international pressures, the government might be forced to take cognizance of those particular issues. Media, I remember long back, NDTV initiated a campaign which made people aware about how to file an RTI. And what had happened that everybody started filing an RTI. So whether you want a ration card, whether you want your passport, because in cheezon mein bahut sari what do you call, bribing hua karti thi. If you want your mark sheet, if you want your degree from a university, you have to pay up, you have to pay the club. NDTV ran a campaign across, and because of which RTI happens to be one of the major instrument if you want to intimidate a corrupt officer. Then there have been several social movements. I don't have to tell you about it. We recently had Farm Bill. We had several social movements, and they do have a positive impact or a certain impact on the way the government alters its course while designing a policy, while conceiving a policy, while thinking about a policy. Because we often had, like in the case of triple talaq, there were several debates on several media channels, in colleges, in communities, and hence the government responded positively towards it. When we look at stakeholders, I've given political party happens to be a major stakeholder. Political parties, legislature, every political party will look at an issue, will look at a problem from its own ideology. Political parties stick with their ideology. But when you enter the parliament, do you leave that ideology behind? Because you're a part of a larger nexus where you can make a difference. But how much of this particular ideology that you're leaving your ideology behind and you're a part of something bigger, how many people imbibe this idea? Have people really imbibed this idea? We need to see. Executive, it's a working wing of the legislature, but executive's role cannot be denied. Why? Because in the case of policy implementation, executive happens to be the forefront, and judiciary then keeping all the three entities above in check. As citizens, do you identify yourself as a stakeholder? क्या आपको लगता है कि आप stakeholder हैं? Because अगर आप stakeholder feel करते हैं अपने आप को, you would ask certain questions, certain pertinent questions. आप ये नहीं कहेंगे कि हमने इस particular political party को elect कर दिया है तो हमारा काम हो गया है. Now इसके बाद से literacy rate बढ़ेगा, इसके बाद से employment rate बढ़ेगा, इसके बाद से there will be no problem. No, you have to constantly keep asking government. You have to constantly keep asking people. You guys are making me laugh. You have to constantly keep asking people. So the government, so that the government also responds to the mood of the citizen. It's not every time that the government will be perceptive that this is what we have planned and this is what our citizens need. Through constant debates, through constant engaging debates, through a constant exchange of ideas, maybe during the time of election, citizens wanted free education. But free education comes with a rider. The quality of education may not be so good, right? So then again, maybe after 2-3 years, the citizens will say, we want quality education, let there be privatization, we are okay with it, but we want quality education, so people change, governments change, and the government and citizens have to act as stakeholders in order to respond to those changes, because your society is changing whether you like it or not. When we look at the whole aspect of welfare administration, we have moved on from socialistic to capitalistic administration. You cannot, in 70s, we were in the field or the era of socialistic administration. I agree. But if you are denying the capitalism, you are living in denial. And this is not good for the economy. This is not good for the society. And when you're designing policies, imagine a socialistic policy in a capitalistic economy. It will not work. Similarly, a capitalistic policy in a socialistic economy will not work. So now when we look at, we've had a disinvestment of Air India, and we've had disinvestment of major PSUs as well. There is a mixed feeling. But remember this, in 1990, when India was moving towards LPG, the same mixed feeling existed. Janata Party did say Congress is selling the state, Desh Bikra, etc., etc. The same narrative happened. So a change never comes, with a whimper. A change happens with a bang, and if your policies are not orienting themselves to those changes, then you're stuck and you will feel the pressure and the repercussions of that stagnation. We are moving from state-owned resources to market-generated resources. This is the call of the day. The state will not cater to your every need. Why? Yes, the state has the infrastructure, but market participation has to be there, because through market participation comes public participation. Market is not an alien entity. Market ko log chalate hain. People run the market. So market participation is a great way to bring in people participation, for that matter, right? Then there are several areas of public policy, particularly in India. Any government that has come to power has created policies in these particular areas: employment generation, education, housing, health, infrastructure, security. Whether it's your UPA or NDA, whether it's your Congress or BJP, whether it's an alliance, any government. And if you remember the Maslow's hierarchy of need, this is your your bottom two pyramid, right? And if this is taken care of, then the next three pyramid, the three tiers of the pyramid will start to form. I listed some of the programs, but I will not go through them. In education, housing, public infrastructure, etc., etc. Now, when we look at where do we go from now, first of all, we have to distinctly identify that policies related to urban infrastructure and rural infrastructure have to be defined, and they have to be created separately. We have confused urbanization with development with urbanization. Development is not urbanization. तो अगर हम गांव में जाकर कहें कि आपके यहाँ तरक्की और विकास तभी आएगा जब यहाँ पे एक मॉल खड़ा होगा, या यहाँ पे एक सिनेमा हॉल होगा, या यहाँ पे मार्केट्स होंगी, नहीं. अगर आपके गांव शहर बन जाएंगे तो आपका अनाज कहाँ उगेगा? We have to understand this. Again, while designing policies, you have to ask yourself, are you designing a farmer bill or is it a farm bill? Because dono mein fark hai. Green revolution revolutionized your land, but it did not revolutionize your farmer. Farmer aaj bhi loan lene ke liye money lender ke paas ja raha hai, which means that the skill and the monetary skill of farmer has not been enhanced. Your farmer is not investment incentive. Your farmer does not know the avenues where he or she can seek investment, or he or she can seek protection of his or her crops, right? So understand this, and having diverse specific policies for urban development and rural development is very important, because if you're clubbing the two, then you're heading towards disaster. You will just replicate the model of developed countries, which will not work in your mixed economy, which will not work in a subcontinent like India. India ko hum subcontinent kehte hain, right? Then again, forward linkages. In poverty elevation program, you gave free education, लेकिन आपने इसके आगे employment generate किया कि अगर आपके पास BA डिग्री है, बैचलर्स इन हिस्ट्री, बैचलर्स इन पॉलिटिकल साइंस, बैचलर्स इन साइकोलॉजी, इसके बाद एम्प्लॉयमेंट एवेन्यू क्या है? या आपको एक और मास्टर्स करना पड़ेगा, या आपको एक और PhD करनी पड़ेगी in order to possibly be eligible for a job, right? So is there a forward linkage? If you are accessing, if you're funding and pumping money, throwing money in public health, what is the guarantee that your citizens who have money will not seek private healthcare? Why? Because the quality of healthcare is good. So now that we've identified that the quality is related to money, then create that kind of quality in public sector as well, in terms of health, in terms of infrastructure. So forward linkage is very important when you're looking at poverty elevation program. Then redefining public service. In India Harvard conference, Shri Nitin Gadkari, he said that public accountability of public officials is important. If somebody is posted as an SDM in a district, then the people of those districts should be able to evaluate that particular DM and SDM as to what work did you do, and how fruitful or how productive was your tenure. Only then there will be a refinement of public service. So when we look at redefining public service as to making public officials accountable, not just to the government, not just to your superior because you have ACR, annual confidential report, but also to the people you're serving. Then modernization. You can see modernization in any way you like. लेकिन जब हम modernization की बात करते हैं, we should, again I will reiterate, we should not confuse modernization with urbanization, because it's a biggest flaw of any policy design. अगर आपने urbanization को modernization समझ लिया, then you're just reprinting the same blueprint, and you will forget the people who are feeding you. India did not achieve food security based on urbanization. India achieved food security based on green revolution, which looked at increasing the productivity of farmlands. But what about the people who are managing those farmlands? They're still waiting for a particular policy to be designed for them. And then, of course, citizens as stakeholders, ask productive questions. Make sure that those questions reflect your future aspirations, and not what has been, but what should be. And with that, मैं अपनी वाणी को आराम दूंगी. And thank you so much.
Very good.
पूरी समाधि.
सांस ले लो.
इतना पानी पी लो.
एक सांस.
Very good presentation by Pooja Paswan.
Okay.
Now open the. Yeah. चलिए. Any questions?
मुझे ये पूछना था पूजा,
हाँ.
कि ये तो जो आपका काम था पब्लिक पॉलिसी डिजाइन एंड इनोवेशन इन इंडिया, ये तो बहुत सारे इस पे काम हो चुके होंगे. कोई इतना इस तरह से, मतलब मुझे लग रहा है कि ये इस पर बहुत काम हो चुका होगा. ये मेरा हंच है, मैं सुन रहा था ध्यान से. सवाल मेरे जैसे कई हैं, जैसे आप एग्जांपल्स दे रही थी कि जो आपने विदर्भ से शुरू किया, फिर आंगनबाड़ी का लिया कि उनको जैसे कि वो बैड उसमें आते हैं, लेकिन एक्चुअली ये जनरल टाइप का एग्जांपल हो गया, जनरलाइजेशन हो गया. क्योंकि आप ध्यान दीजिए, वही मनरेगा, वही जो आंगनबाड़ी है या जो हेल्थ वर्कर्स हैं बंगाल में, केरल में गजब का सक्सेस है. वो मनरेगा इज अ ह्यूज सक्सेस इन केरला. Like you see there, even government schools ka, that is a huge success in West Bengal, Kerala, even in Maharashtra. The structure is relatively very good. Relatively Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, even in Rajasthan, that's very good. So we need to look into. We can't just make generalized comments that कि ये ऐसे हो गया, बैड में आ गया.
नहीं, बैड तो मैंने कहा ही नहीं.
नहीं, उसमें जो आपका पीपीटी.
नहीं, आपने ढंग से सुना नहीं. मैंने ये कहा नहीं, आपने ढंग से सुना नहीं. मैंने ये कहा था बैड पब्लिसिटी इन द सेंस दैट इन केस ऑफ सिविल सोसाइटीज, लाइक कुछ सिविल सोसाइटीज धरने के लिए भी लोगों को इकट्ठा कर लेते हैं.
नहीं, वो बैड पब्लिसिटी.
मनन इज अ ब्यूटीफुल डॉक्यूमेंट, और वो मैंने कहा है. आई डिडंट से दैट मनन.
मुझे कंप्लीट कर लेने दो. हां. बैड पब्लिसिटी तो वो बेसिकली क्या है ना, कि उस तरह के स्टेट्स में जहां की बैड माने स्ट्रक्चर है एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का, या फिर एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का जहां बैड स्ट्रक्चर है, उस तरह से. केरल में इट्स अ ह्यूज सक्सेस, आई नो पर्सनली. बंगाल में भी बहुत ही ह्यूज सक्सेस है. वहां पे जितने भी गरीब लोग हैं उनको गजब का मदद मिला है आंगनबाड़ी से. उनके बच्चे प्ले स्कूल में नहीं पढ़ते हैं, वो उन्हीं स्कूलों में चलते हैं. दूसरी बात, जो विदर्भ की बात थी, उनको जो प्रधानमंत्री ने जो योजना थी उससे जो खाते खुले, उससे भी उनको बहुत कोई रिलीफ नहीं मिले. वो उन्हीं साहूकारों से अभी भी लोन ले रहे हैं. तो यही 2-3 मेरे जो बेसिक जो एक
सवाल क्या है आपका?
मेरा सवाल यही है कि इस पे नया क्या है. तो बहुत सारा इस पे काम
आपने कहा काम हो चुका है, आपने देखा है काम?
नहीं, काम
अब मैं बताती हूँ आपको. PMGSY पे सिर्फ 3 थीसिस हैं सर. एक मेरी है, एक देयर इज वन फ्रॉम हैदराबाद, एंड देयर इज आई थिंक वन फ्रॉम राजस्थान. शोध गंगा में देखिए.
पब्लिक पॉलिसी डिजाइन और इनोवेशन इंडिया में, मतलब कि पब्लिक पॉलिसी डिजाइन में बहुत काम हुआ होगा, बहुत सारे लेख लिखे गए.
नहीं सर, आपने वही तो मैं कह रही हूँ ना सर, लेख लिखना और उसको फील्ड में इम्प्लीमेंट करना और ये डिजाइन देखना. जो मैंने आपको ये काम दिखाया है, इसमें से कितने काम आप जानते हैं ये इम्प्लीमेंटेशन कहाँ हुआ है? दिल्ली में हुआ है. Why? Because Arvind Kejriwal is also a product of my school, Harvard Kennedy. He is also a product of my, and I saw so many similarities. उन्होंने जो ये गवर्नमेंट स्कूल ठीक कर दिए दिल्ली में, it's because of this particular model. When I was studying the case study, मैंने कहा this is exactly, इसमें मैंने काफी चीजें नहीं बताई हैं. नज थ्योरी होती है, जो मैंने ये डिजाइन पॉलिसी चेंज बताया आपको, जो मैंने ये स्ट्रेटेजिक ट्रायंगल बताया आपको, all of this when I was reading, I said this is 100%. I was like, this is 100% Arvind Kejriwal's model. So sir, काम तो ऐसे हुआ है जो आपने देखा है, but research नहीं sir, I'm sorry to say, I'm very sorry to say, but research इस पे बहुत ही कम हुआ है और होना है. हाँ, पेपर्स बहुत आते हैं, आर्टिकल्स बहुत आते हैं, लोग चर्चा करते हैं. मैं वही कह रही हूँ ना, पीएमजीएसवाई कब आया था, भारत निर्माण कब आया था, 2000 में आया था, 2021 चल रहा है, सिर्फ 3 थीसिस है पीएमजीएसवाई पे. क्यों नहीं किया रिसर्चर ने काम? Why?
पूछिए.
Yeah, Ravi, please.
आप पूछिएगा इनसे बात.
Thank you, ma'am. Congratulations for a good speedy paper.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi.
One thing, again, I would like you to correct. I think a couple of days back also a scholar had corrected you. Punjab and cold desert theory, it's not correct because मुझे डर है कि आपको पूरा नहीं करने देंगे क्वेश्चन.
पूरा कर लीजिए.
What I'm trying to say, पंजाब का नाम ही ना पंच नद से आया है, 5 नदियों का क्षेत्र.
हाँ,
अभी desert नहीं रहा.
Dr. Suman said the same thing.
अब उसके आगे हम चलते हैं. आपने अर्बन और रूरल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की बात की. यहाँ मुझे याद आता है डॉक्टर कलाम का पूरा providing urban amenities to rural areas to bridge the gap and to discourage migration, it's not prevent, to discourage migration. फिर पब्लिक पॉलिसी के क्षेत्र में अगर इंडिया की बात करें तो एक there is kind of apathy. Of course, I admit that there is a sense of apathy amongst scholars towards creating new public policies, finding out new public policies, क्योंकि हमारा वो कॉलोनियल माइंडसेट गया नहीं है वेस्ट से अडॉप्ट करने का, बोरो करने का. लेकिन पॉलिसीज आर एट वर्क. जैसे मनरेगा है तो महाराष्ट्र गवर्नमेंट की कई पॉलिसीज जो हैं
बहुत सक्सेसफुल है.
गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने अडॉप्ट की. मनरेगा ये जो जॉब एश्योरेंस का है, महाराष्ट्र गवर्नमेंट ने सबसे पहले शुरू की. जैसे संदीप जी बता रहे थे कि कामराज जी ने मिड डे मील जैसी योजना पहले ही शुरू कर दी थी. तो पॉलिसी काम पर है. अब जहां तक मैं थ्योरेटिकल एस्पेक्ट समझना चाहता हूँ, क्योंकि आपका पेपर पूरा फंक्शनल पार्ट ऑफ पब्लिक पॉलिसी पर था, बट हम फेल वही होते हैं कि इंडिया में फंक्शनल पार्ट पर ही हमारा डिस्कशन होता है, थ्योरेटिकल पार्ट पर डिस्कशन बहुत कम है. तो जैसे रॉबर्ट हाल की थियरीज की बात करें, विद्युत चक्रवर्ती इंडिया में अगर हम बात करें, जो लोगों ने थोड़ी बात की कि मोनोपोली ओवर रिसोर्सेस, जब हम पब्लिक पॉलिसी की बात करते हैं हमारे यहाँ इस पर डिस्कशन बहुत कम होता है कि हु इज कंट्रोलिंग और अप्रोप्रिएटिंग द रिसोर्सेज एंड हु इज मोनोपोलाइजिंग द रिसोर्सेज. यहाँ रेफरेंस आता है एलिट मॉडल ऑफ पब्लिक पॉलिसी एंड ग्रुप मॉडल ऑफ पब्लिक पॉलिसी का. So which model of public policy do you think would be suitable for India? Whether we should, right now we are going more or less we are going with elite model of public policy.
That's what you think. आप पहले सवाल पूरा कीजिए फिर मैं
No,
जवाब
so
दूंगी.
we are going through elite model of public policy because most of the policies are made on table, not in ground. And so therefore they are elite in texture, nature, in their application, and most of them are disastrously failing because of this. क्योंकि जैसे हमने 100 स्मार्ट सिटी की भी बात की, but that's a great idea कि हम ठीक है सिटी, let the cities be smart. उसमें एक एस्पेक्ट सक्सेसफुल हुआ, क्लीनलीनेस वाला. म्युनिसिपैलिटीज क्योंकि उसमें डायरेक्ट एंगेज हो गए, उनको मैंडेट हो गया, तो सफाई वाला कार्यक्रम काफी सक्सेसफुल हुआ. लेकिन बाकी की चीजें जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर अपग्रेडेशन की थी, जो इम्प्रूविंग क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ, चाहे वो हेल्थ है, एजुकेशन है, अर्बन एरियाज में, वो तो फेल हो या फिर वैसे ही रह गई जैसी थी. तो आप इस पर क्या कहना चाहेंगे? एलीट मॉडल यहाँ पर काम आएगा या फिर ग्रुप मॉडल काम आएगा या फिर कोई तीसरा मॉडल आप सजेस्ट करना
नहीं,
चाहेंगे?
हाँ ठीक है. थैंक यू डॉक्टर रवि. सबसे पहले आपने कहा कि प्रोवाइडिंग, आपने डॉक्टर कलाम का एग्जांपल लिया कि उन्होंने कहा एक प्रोवाइडिंग एमिनिटीज, अर्बन एमिनिटीज इन रूरल
पूरा
एरियाज.
उनका कॉन्सेप्ट था PURA.
Yes, yes. Now, urban amenities, high speed internet connection देना, then again, clean drinking water, ये basic है. लेकिन urban amenities देने का मतलब ये था कि वहां पे अगर आउट माइग्रेशन नहीं हो, अगर वहां पे आपको जॉब्स मिल रही हैं तो आउट माइग्रेशन होने की पॉसिबिलिटी थोड़ी कम होगी. Why? Because you get to live with your family, you get to be in a similar surrounding, right? दूसरी बात ये, अगर आप elite और group model देखते हैं तो that depends on a specific issue and a challenge. Elite model, जैसे मैंने आपको बताया था कि elite capture का example दिया था. Now in the aspect, yeah, I'm talking to you.
Please address the entire
Please,
gamut.
please.
Yeah. So in the
नहीं,
aspect,
वो 3 बातों में बात करिए कि
नहीं,
जिससे
हाँ,
हाँ,
in the aspect of looking at issues and challenges, अगर मैं education देखती हूँ तो उसमें elite model नहीं आ सकता सर. अगर मैं employment generation देखती हूँ तो उसमें elite model नहीं आ सकता, उसमें ग्रुप मॉडल आएगा. लेकिन अगर मैं पब्लिक हेल्थ देखती हूँ तो सर उसमें मुझे elite मॉडल देखना पड़ेगा. आई हैव टू प्रोवाइड क्वालिटी ऑफ हेल्थ. आई कैन नॉट प्रोवाइड शॉर्टी डिलीवरी रूम्स जहां से इन्फेक्शन के चांसेस ज्यादा होंगे. आई कैन नॉट प्रोवाइड सब स्टैंडर्ड न्यूट्रिशनल सप्लीमेंट्स जिसको खा के बच्चे बीमार होंगे. आई कैन नॉट प्रोवाइड सब स्टैंडर्ड वैक्सीन्स जिसको लेकर लोग बीमार होंगे. सो
elite model का concept ये नहीं
नहीं नहीं नहीं सर, मेरी बात सुनिए, ये है. दूसरी बात आपने कहा, नहीं मेरी बात सुनिए, आपने कहा कि these policies are designed in a certain on the upper rungs, in closed doors of office. Absolutely. So sir, my understanding of a particular problem has to be from a specialized perspective. Only then I can break down and deconstruct at the ground level.
But the question remains,
Yes.
हमारे जो policy makers भी है ना,
हाँ.
they themselves are generalized people. IAS officers
Sorry
हमारे
sir, अब नहीं है ऐसा. Because of lateral entry, specialization is entering. Because of lateral entry, specialization is entering your policy design and policy implementation process. तो अब ऐसा नहीं है कि इनको आप कहेंगे ये generalist functionary है. जब तक कोई IAS officer, yes, you might have a secretary whose background is a medicine background or who's an engineer, but उनके साथ आजकल specialist entry आ रही है through lateral entry, and this is one of the factors. And I think a brilliant program of Modi government. So you do have specialization in different ministries.
आयुष्मान योजना.
Can you cite references for our
आयुष्मान योजना
वो जो
is one
lateral
of the
entry
best,
है उस पे तो इतना मैंने
health defense योजना.
मैंने एक तरह से ऐसे लोगों की
जो
एंट्री हुई है.
जनरल है उसमें भी तो ट्रेनिंग दी जा रही है ना, यंग ऑफिसर्स को, फिर मिड करियर ट्रेनिंग, उनको
वो जो
स्पेशलाइजेशन
lateral
दिया
entry
जाता
है
है.
वो तो बहुत बड़ा स्कैम है. मतलब ऐसे
नहीं
लोगों
सर,
को एंट्री
बिल्कुल
दी गई
भी.
है.
I'm sorry,
It's
I'm so
okay,
sorry, but नहीं है.
सॉरी की बात नहीं है इसमें. Why
नहीं.
will you be
No,
sorry?
I'm
you be-
literally sorry.
नहीं,
but I'm तो बिल्कुल
आप
नहीं.
सेलेक्ट एक मैंने
इसका सॉल्यूशन ये है ना, आप अपनी रिसर्च के बेसिस पे बात
कुछ
करिए।
reference
हाँ,
बताइए.
एग्जैक्टली वो
Can you
रेफरेंस
get- आपका
research
source
के
of
basis
reference
पे
क्या है?
बात
एग्जैक्टली डेटा.
फिर उसमें डिस्कशन की जरूरत नहीं
Yes sir, please.
Yes, sir. Okay, let me ask.
आपका source of reference.
एग्जैक्टली.
My source of reference has been my 10 years of study, what I have done.
आपने कोई बुक या ऐसा कोई theoretical reference नहीं
Yes,
किया?
sir.
Sir, वो पेपर में है.
Please.
Yes, sir.
Sir, please.
कॉन्फिडेंस से बोला, बहुत आर्टिकुलेटेड था,
Yeah.
बहुत अच्छा प्रेजेंटेशन था. मैं स्टूडेंट पब्लिक पॉलिसी का नहीं हूँ, इसलिए एक लेमैन के तौर पर पूछ रहा हूँ जो पूछ रहा हूँ. एक तो बात यह है कि पब्लिक पॉलिसी जैसा आपने बताया, ऐसा लगता है बहुत सारे सेक्टर्स होंगे इसके,
जी हाँ.
एक या दो सेक्टर्स तो नहीं हो सकते. तो जैसे ही चीज एक से बहुत सारी हो जाती है, फॉर इंस्टेंस एजुकेशन, हेल्थ, गवर्नेंस, डेवलपमेंट, तो जब बहुत सारी चीजें हो जाती है तो उसमें एक सबसे पहला सवाल उठता है हायरार्की का और उनके बीच में इंटर रिलेशनशिप का. तो सबसे पहला तो ये रिजॉल्व होना चाहिए इशू. प्रायोरिटीज, जब आपके रिसोर्सेज लिमिटेड होते हैं तो हमें अपनी प्रायोरिटीज फिक्स करनी पड़ती है. ठीक है, तो मेरा कहने का मतलब ये है कि एक तो सेक्टर्स की प्रायोरिटी हर हायरार्की का सवाल है, और एक उनकी इंटरनल रिलेशनशिप का सवाल है. इसको रिजॉल्व किए बिना हम कोई मॉडल नहीं दे सकते. तो पहला तो इस इशू को रिजॉल्व होना चाहिए. एक बात ये मैं कहना चाहता हूँ. दूसरी चीज, कुछ इश्यूज बहुत स्ट्रक्चरल होते हैं, जैसे पॉवर्टी है. तो पॉवर्टी जैसे गरीबी एक इतना स्ट्रक्चरल इशू है कि उसमें आप सिर्फ कुछ चीजों की बात करके या रिफॉर्म्स की बात करके स्ट्रक्चरल चीजों को आप रिमूव नहीं करते.
हाँ.
उदाहरण के लिए मैं बताऊं, गांधी और मार्क्स को ले लीजिए. तो मार्क्स जो है उसके लिए पॉवर्टी एक बिल्कुल स्ट्रक्चरल और इनइक्वालिटी बिल्कुल स्ट्रक्चरल चीज थी। जब तक उस पूरे स्ट्रक्चर को ही डिमोलिश किए करके हम दूसरा स्ट्रक्चर से रिप्लेस नहीं करेंगे तो तब तक ये चीजें रिमूव ही नहीं हो सकती। तो इस इशू के बारे में भी आपको थोड़ा सा कुछ एक सेकेंड।
हाँ, अच्छा ठीक है।
ठीक है, तो और डिजाइन और इनोवेशन, मुझे आपकी बात बहुत अच्छी लगी दो चीजों के बारे में। एक चीज जो आपने बहुत इंसिस्ट किया कि अर्बनाइजेशन और मॉडर्नाइजेशन डेवलपमेंट नहीं है सिर्फ, जबकि हमारी आज तक की जो फ्री इंडिया की जो पॉलिसी रही है वो ज्यादा ओरिएंटेड रही है ऑर्गेनाइजेशन या मॉडर्नाइजेशन की तरफ। पर थोड़ा सा अगर आप ऑल्टरनेटिव को डिटेल में डिस्कस करते तो हमें और ज्यादा समझ में आता।
ऑल्टरनेटिव, अच्छा आपने कहा, अच्छा सर आपने कहा कि यू हैव टू ब्रेक डाउन अ स्ट्रक्चर लाइक पावर इन केस ऑफ पॉवर्टी। सर दिस इज एन आइडियोलॉजी। नाउ इमेजिन पुट योरसेल्फ एज अ पॉलिसी मेकर। आप प्रधानमंत्री हैं देश के और आपने सोचा कि आप इरेडिकेट करेंगे पॉलिसीज 5 साल में। तो सर सबसे पहले तो आपको पॉवर्टी इरेडिकेट करेंगे तो सर सबसे पहले तो आपको पॉवर्टी को डिफाइन करना पड़ेगा ना, कि कोई इंसान अगर इतना रुपए महीने का या दिन का कमाता है और इससे नीचे कमाता है तो वो पुअर है। जैसे हम बीपीएल से डिफाइन करते हैं कि अगर मेरी आमदनी इतने रुपए है पर डे की तो मैं गरीब वर्ग में आती हूँ, ये है। इससे मैंने आइडेंटिफाई किया। मैं ये भी आइडेंटिफाई कर सकती हूँ लाइक इन द केस ऑफ स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ लिविंग। स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ लिविंग के 3 पैरामीटर्स हैं सर, एचडीआई इंडेक्स के 3 पैरामीटर्स हैं, एजुकेशन है, हेल्थ है एंड क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ है, राइट सर। उससे भी हम आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं। तो सर जब तक हम चीजों को टेंजिबल नहीं बनाएंगे हम एड्रेस नहीं कर पाएंगे, राइट। पॉलिसी, जब मैंने पॉलिसी डिजाइन और इनोवेशन की बात की उसमें मैंने ये कहा कि वी हैव टू मेक थिंग्स टेंजिबल। अगर आप आइडेंटिफाई नहीं करते तो आप सॉल्व नहीं कर सकते। अगर मुझे ये पता है कि मेरे पैर में दर्द है तो वो बहुत चीजों की वजह से हो सकता है, मस्कुलर पेन की वजह से हो सकता है, हेयरलाइन फ्रैक्चर की वजह से हो सकता है, 10 चीजों की वजह से हो सकता है। बट इफ आई एम नॉट डायग्नोस्ड प्रॉपरली आई विल नेवर बी एबल टू एड्रेस इट। यू टॉक्ड अबाउट स्ट्रक्चरल, demolishing one structure and creating another structure, but both the structures served a purpose. I have to identify what is my purpose. I also, in one of the slides, I talked about moving from socialistic to capitalistic form of government or form of society. If today I feel that my society is socialistic, my policies have to be designed in a certain way because I've diagnosed my society to be socialistic in nature. If I feel that no, I am in transition, my policy has to be designed in that particular way. So that diagnosis is important. And sir, ये diagnosis कौन करेगा? आपके मुझे अगर पैर में दर्द है तो मैं स्पेशलिस्ट डॉक्टर के पास ही जाऊंगी। अगर मुझे इफ आई वांट समथिंग एज अ सिटीजन, या तो मैं अपने रिप्रेजेंटेटिव से बात करूंगी, इलेक्टेड रिप्रेजेंटेटिव या सिलेक्टेड रिप्रेजेंटेटिव जो ब्यूरोक्रेट है, जो पोस्टेड, जिनके बारे में मुझे पता है, मैं उनके पास अपनी प्रॉब्लम लेके जाऊंगी। इन्होंने बात की थी जनरलिस्ट और स्पेशलिस्ट फंक्शनरी के बारे में। जो ब्यूरोक्रेट्स होते हैं वो आते हैं जनरलिस्ट फंक्शनरी, लेकिन थ्रू आउट द ट्रेनिंग व्हेन दे नो द इन्स एंड आउट्स ऑफ द सर्विस, सर इट इज सो इंट्रिकेट बिकॉज आई कम फ्रॉम अ फैमिली ऑफ सिविल सर्वेंट्स। इट इज सो इंट्रिकेट एंड द जॉब डिजाइन entails you to keep yourself constantly involved 24/7. Those people speak the language even after they retire. Those people are constantly involved. You cannot run a country without not being deeply involved. अगर हम ये कहें कि कांग्रेस ने कोई काम नहीं किया या बीजेपी कोई काम नहीं करी, ये कहना थोड़ा गलत होगा सर, because every phase, every form of government has given something to the society. It has taken away as well, and they gave something based on the fact that the way they were able to diagnose. अच्छा सर, इसमें गलती ये भी है, इन्होंने कहा कोई रिसर्च नहीं हुई है। सर सही कहा, इन्होंने कोई रिसर्च नहीं, इन्होंने कहा बहुत रिसर्च हुई है। सर कोई रिसर्च नहीं हुई, यहाँ एकेडमिक्स की गलती है। पीएमजीएसवाई सिर्फ 3 थीसिस थे। वन सेकंड सर, सिर्फ 3 पीएचडी थीसिस हैं, सिर्फ 3 पीएचडी। तो एकेडमिक्स में as academicians I think sir we have failed because हमने सिर्फ थ्योरी पे ध्यान दिया, इम्प्लीमेंटेशन पे नहीं। जबकि कितने जेएनयू के बच्चे हैं और कितने सेंट्रल यूनिवर्सिटी के बच्चे हैं जो अपने गांव से आते हैं, पर क्या उन्होंने अपने गांव को केस स्टडी के रूप में लिया? नहीं लिया सर। मेरी केस स्टडी इज ऑफ समस्तीपुर, दरभंगा एंड मधुबनी, although I am from Sitamarhi, but I decided to observe the 3 districts of my state, you know, in comparison to how this particular policy is being implemented. मैंने implementation ही देखा सर।
Very good, Pooja.
As academicians, sir, we have failed to bring out research so that public policy makers, sir, because in United States, academics work in tandem with policy makers. Condoleezza Rice was a professor of political science in Stanford before she was the what was she?
Foreign minister.
No, not foreign minister. She was no, not Germany की chancellor होती है.
And
She was the head of the state, the secretary of the state, sir, in Bush's government.
लेकिन सवाल अभी
Sir, नहीं, सवाल पूरा हुआ है. सर मैंने अपने हिसाब से आंसर किया है. एकेडमिक्स नहीं सर, एकेडमिक्स और प्रैक्टिशनर्स में टैंडम हमारे देश में नहीं है. You know, सर यहाँ हम फॉल्टर करते हैं. And then
ओके सुधीर जी जल्दी.
हाँ.
टाइम खत्म होने वाला है.
हाँ, इसीलिए
एक है ना.
अभी मुझे कंक्लूजन करना है.
चलिए.
ओके ऐसे ही पूछ लेते हैं.
हाँ.
इंडिया में सेल्फ एक्चुअलाइजेशन चांस मिलता होगा. तो नीचे वाला आपका प्लेस है.
हाँ.
वही इफेक्ट से बच जाती है.
Yes.
इसमें आपने कहीं जनसंख्या का जो रोल है, प्रॉब्लम है.
हाँ.
हम कॉपी करते हैं यूएस का.
हाँ.
राइट. यूएस जब राजीव गांधी जी थे, उन्होंने वेरी मच वेरी रिस्पेक्ट. बहुत रिलेक्टेंट थे इंडियंस टू गो फॉर दिस मशीन. बोला हम लेबर कर लेंगे, दिन रात अपने मेंटेन कर लेंगे अपने जो भी उन्होंने करवाया. एक तो हमारे अंदर क्या आप ये नहीं मानती हैं कि किसी भी चेंज को अडेप्ट करने के लिए बहुत ही ज्यादा मतलब रेजिस्टेंस है हमारे अंदर. दूसरा, यूएस को हम कॉपी करते हैं ब्लाइंडली, लेट इट बी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर और आइडियोलॉजी और समथिंग लाइक दैट. क्या रीजन है कि उनकी पॉपुलेशन से हम जो भी मींस डेमोग्राफिक जो उनकी सिचुएशन है वो हमसे बिल्कुल मेल नहीं खाती है. क्योंकि हमारे ही देश के कितने लोग वहां जाके बसते हैं बहुत ही कंफर्ट लाइफ के लिए, और वो ये कह के छोड़ते हैं कि ये देश तो बहुत ही ओवर पॉपुलेटेड है. तो आपने जो पेपर था इसमें पॉपुलेशन का कहीं भी जिक्र नहीं आया जहां तक मैंने देखा. पॉपुलेशन की स्टडीज में आप डालेंगे, क्योंकि कोई भी आप पॉलिसी बनाते हैं तो टारगेट ग्रुप किन लोगों के लिए कितनी है उस पर भी निर्भर करता है.
नहीं सर, अग्रीड, बट ड्यू टू टाइम पॉसिबिलिटी, बट दिस इज इन माय पेपर. आपने कहा कि हमें थोड़ी हिचकिचाहट होती है चेंज को अडैप्ट करने में, राइट? बट ये ह्यूमन टेंडेंसी है सर, वी ऑलवेज अवॉइड चेंज. बट टेल मी समथिंग, नोबडी अवॉइड्स अ गुड चेंज. कल को सपोजिंग अगर मैं ये कहूँ कि आप सबके अकाउंट में 2 करोड़ रुपए आने वाले हैं, ये चेंज आप बहुत रेडिली एक्सेप्ट करेंगे. लेकिन अगर ये कहें कि कल से पेट्रोल के दाम बढ़ रहे हैं, ये चेंज आप बिल्कुल एक्सेप्ट नहीं करेंगे. सो पीपल
लगता है अगर आप ये कहें कि हमें 2 करोड़ रुपए हमारे अकाउंट में
नहीं, बट ये चेंज है ना. नहीं
मोदी जी एक बार हमें
इंतजार ही करते रहेंगे.
coming back to the crux of the what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
No. What I'm trying to say.
टाइम खत्म हो गया सर.
What I'm trying to say is people accept a good change. People always accept upgrade. That's true.
चलो ओके पूजा. यस
बाहर
हो गया टाइम.
नहीं प्लीज
बाहर
चलो.
पूछ लीजिएगा.
छोटी सी जिज्ञासा है, साथ में एक छोटा सा क्वेश्चन है.
अब देखिए, अब आप टाइम ले रहे हैं.
ओके चलिए.
सर मेरा एक पॉलिसी के ऊपर
जो टॉपिक
मेरा
आप
छोटा
हैं,
है,
आपका
जो मुझे कल की लिख
बाद में पूछ लेना.
जी हाँ,
आपने इसको thesis जमा कर दिया
2016
16 में. तो आज अभी नया क्या कर रही है इस समय?
मैंने PMGSY पे थीसिस जमा किया था और ये पेपर मैं 10 साल से पढ़ा रही हूँ.
अच्छा, तो अब यही चीज आप फिर रिपीट
नहीं, ये there are several changes in the public policy stagnant नहीं होती. डॉक्टर अनिल गिरी, पब्लिक पॉलिसी स्टैग्नेंट नहीं होती.
डेटा ली है, सारा डेटा नया उसमें पूछा.
एब्सोल्युटली, मैंने वही कहा ना कि, और इसमें मैंने डेटा ज्यादा दिया कहाँ है. आई टॉक्ड अबाउट डिजाइन एंड इनोवेशन.
आपकी शुरू की स्लाइड क्या थी? शुरू की स्लाइड में ये थी कि सोसाइटी 3 प्रकार की होती है.
मैंने ये कहा था पब्लिक पॉलिसी 3 चीजों से
प्रभावित होती है.
सोशियो इकोनॉमिक, सोशियो कल्चरल, सोशियो पॉलिटिकल.
सोसाइटी बात करिए, सोसाइटी में 3 उसको डिवीजन आप 3 प्रकार से.
नहीं, मैंने डिवीजन किया ही नहीं सोसाइटी.
मैं बता रहा हूं, सुनिए तो पहले. एग्रेरियन सोसाइटी का है, आउटरिज्म प्रेगमेटिक सोसाइटी.
दैट्स रिक्स प्रिज्मेटिक साला मॉडल.
और एक इंडस्ट्रियल सोसाइटी.
दैट्स रिक्स प्रिज्मेटिक साला मॉडल.
हां ठीक है. हाँ, मैं जानना चाहता हूँ इंडिया में सर्विस सेक्टर में जो है मोर देन 55%.
हाँ,
उनकी भी अपनी सोसाइटी, आपने उनको क्यों नहीं इंक्लूड किया?
ओके चलो बाद में दिक्कत होगी.
साला मॉडल.
ओके चलो गीता जल्दी चलो.
गीता पूछेंगे आप, पूछिए
जल्दी.
थैंक यू बोले जा रहे हैं.
थैंक यू नहीं, मुझे डॉक्टर पूजा, रियली योर पेपर वाज रियली वेरी गुड. I'm just asking one question. This is not for criticizing. This is only for enriching my knowledge, because as you know, tomorrow is my paper is scheduled on transgender. I would like to know about, is there any education policy or any job security, especially for the transgender? Only for addition in my paper, I would like to ask you this question, because you are working in this public sector. Your paper is this public administration too, so you have a various knowledge. नया नया क्या है या फिर गवर्नमेंट कुछ करने वाली है, इसके बारे में आपको कुछ नॉलेज है तो प्लीज गाइड मी.
नहीं, I'm not aware.
नहीं अभी तो
ओके चलो, थैंक यू वेरी मच.
ठीक है.
कॉन्ग्रेचुलेशन टू डॉक्टर पूजा.
हाँ
कंक्लूजन में मैं इतना ही कहना चाहता हूँ, जो अनिल जी ने बात की वही बात मेरे ख्याल में, कि पॉपुलेशन के बारे में सबसे ज्यादा कोई भी पॉलिसी इंप्लीमेंट करनी हो या बात करनी हो तो सबसे पहले पॉपुलेशन के बारे. इकोनॉमिक भी मैं बात करूं तो पहले जब हम पढ़ाते थे तो ऐसे कहते थे पॉपुलेशन इज अवर, क्या कहते हैं, हमारे लिए बोझा है. आज इकोनॉमिक्स के बारे में हम यही कहते हैं कि दुनिया में सबसे ज्यादा दूसरे नंबर की पॉपुलेशन हमारे देश की है और सारे विश्व की सारी कंपनियां हमारे देश में आए और हमारा देश का डेवलपमेंट करें.
50% youngest.
जो पहले
Not
बोझ था,
50%, that's wrong.
जो पहले बोझ था
No.
वही आज
50 पे
हमारी
आना क्यों
कैपिटल
problem?
बन गई है.
50%.
पॉलिसी के बारे में कहे, मैं किसी भी गवर्नमेंट की तरफदारी नहीं कर रहा हूँ, लेकिन अभी जितनी भी पॉलिसी हुए सभी पर्सनल पॉलिसी है. जैसे आयुष्मान योजना हेल्थ के लिए जो 5 लाख का इंश्योरेंस दे रहे हैं, बहुत अच्छी पॉलिसी है. मेक इन इंडिया, मेड इन इंडिया,
Skill India.
वो सारी जब पॉलिसी है उससे हमारा देश का डेवलपमेंट बहुत अच्छी तरह से हो रहा है. और मैं पूजा से यही दरखास्त करूंगा कि ये ओवरऑल पॉलिसी के बारे में सोचने की जगह है, अब स्पेशल पॉलिसी के बारे में कुछ रिसर्च करें. और मेक इन इंडिया है, ये कुछ है, इसमें आप कुछ रिसर्च करें और इसी पॉलिसी मेकिंग में आप कुछ योगदान दोगे तो आपका भविष्य बहुत सुंदर रहेगा. और कॉन्ग्रेचुलेसन एंड थैंक यू वेरी मच.
जिस पे आप काम कर रहे हैं उस
सर माइक बंद करते हैं.
इसका
अभी उज्जवल रहता है सुंदर.
पंचायत
हाँ,
का
कहा
एम्पावरमेंट, सिविल
आपने
सर्वेंट्स
जितनी
का
बात की
करना है.
तो कल मैं फिर से रिपीट करूँ. हाँ,
सर शब्दों पे मत जाइए, भावनाएं
भावनाएं.
चलिए आइए विश्वास.
रिकॉर्डिंग बंद है,
हमेशा
बंद कीजिए ना. 2 मिनट बंद
अश्विनी जी
कीजिए.
बंद कर दीजिए.
अच्छा.
लाइव एक ही बात